Wow, I didn't know you could juggle.
Yep, used to do it all the time.
Wow.
Don't rely on your partner. Rely on local RAC home insurance. Plus, you get great everyday savings. That's the power of membership. RAC Insurance. For the better. Check the PDS at rac.com.au.
Clive Palmer's not frightened of an interview. Mr Shorten is, obviously, and doesn't want to answer some of the tough questions. Mr Palmer, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Alan. Well, it's $1 trillion. That's what it'll cost in new taxes and new costs by Shifty Shorten. He won't answer the question. He won't tell the Australian people, but he'll bankrupt this country. He'll bankrupt every individual. He'll put people out of work. He'll destroy our economy and our future, and we've got to reject him at the polls. Are you confident that people understand this? No, I'm not, but we'll be conducting a campaign in the next week in the media pointing out the $1 trillion it costs to the Australian economy and new taxes and the negative incentive for people. They'll lose hope for themselves and we'll lose our enterprise and all we can be as Australians. We've just all got to come together as a united team and stop it. You've taken out an ad, or many ads actually. One other thing, I covered with you last week the Queensland nickel workers, and you answered those questions, and people can make their judgment about all of that. Could I just ask you one final thing, though, that the consulting liquidator, just to get this out of the way, a bloke called John Park, who regarded the communication issued by you about saying we'll transfer the assets and the employees and the assets to a new operator and the business will continue. And he said that was grossly misleading. He said the refusal to transfer all employees and assets to a new operator to allow the business to continue, the refusal was, quote, not a refusal to transfer employees, rather a refusal to accept an undertaking to comply from Mensink that the joint venture parties would pay the liabilities of the company limited to the administration period only. There was no offer to meet creditors' claims. Just a quick one again. If you aren't going to meet the creditors' claims and the extra money owed to the workers, who should? Well, first of all, the liquidator administrator who sacked the workers should be held responsible for what he did. There's court evidence, which I think you've got a copy of the affidavit. Yes. Unrefuted by the liquidator saying that we wanted to transfer the employees and she recognises that the business could continue. So that's a fact, in my opinion. Right, in relation to the payment of creditors, not employees for a second, and creditors really were creditors of the people that owned the refinery. Queensland Nickel was just an agent, and as an agent they enter into contracts and transactions on behalf of the principals. Both of the principals are solvent. Both of them are said in court that they're accepting full responsibility for all claims. Well, I understand that, and we don't. You've answered that, and people can make their own judgment about that. I just wanted to give you a chance to answer it. And one other thing, I'm getting letters following the interview with you asking me to ask you what you intend to do about Hyatt Coolum at Coolum in Queensland, and I understand you bought that 10 years ago and you've closed it down. One family has written to me to say, my husband and I, like many, many others, own one of these residences bought 20 years ago with the intention that when we retired, we'd stay there regularly. Access has been denied for the last 10 years by Mr. Palmer. What does he intend to do? We're now 75 and 70. We'd like to get access and enjoy what we bought. How do you answer that? Well, all of them that have units, they have access. It's under a body corporate scheme, and we can in no way impede that access. So that's just not true. They should contact their body corporate manager if they have any problems of getting access, but certainly that's not the case. With Coolum, it's not closed now. The golf course is fully operational, and if people want to enjoy the resort, is kept in tip-top condition. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It's just a media beat-up. I'd advise them to go and look at the place and visit their unit. Right, you've taken out an ad, on many ads actually, to say that it's time to stop foreign powers corrupting our country. What do you mean by that? Well, you saw Paul Keating yesterday go on the other day at the Labor conference about how great China was and how we had to ditch the United States. Paul Keating's been appointed to the Development Bank of China as a director. And all our ex-politicians, Andrew Robb is up at the port. He was appointed to the port after he approved the port acquisition by a Chinese company. And money seems to matter more than our sovereignty with a lot of people in politics. Bob Carr, Bob Hawke, they're all on Chinese think tanks, one on Australian think tanks. So you're saying you can't rely on, you say the Australian people elected me as a living national treasure, etc., and you say we can't rely on the, quote, hopeless fake news brigades of Labor and the Liberals. They sell you down the Yellow River. Is there a concern about the fact that foreign interests own our dairy farms, our avocado farms, our water, our mines, the Port of Darwin,
Where does this end? Are you concerned about that, and what should be done?
Well, first of all, if someone owns all your ports, they control what you import and what you export, right? So if they want to control our international trade, limit our country to what we could be, they can do that by choking our infrastructure. If you take China as an example, we can't buy ports, we can't buy airports in China. Can you imagine the Japanese prior to World War II buying an airport in Australia and operating a port that could take jet aircraft? I can't. So I can't be corrupted because I've got enough money. Money's got no attraction to me, but I do care about our country, and I put these propositions forward not to promote myself, but to give the Australian people an awareness of what's happening in our country. It's up to them to make the decision.
Correct. You say Australians pay more for their electricity than New Yorkers. We could solve our electricity problem, you say, with nuclear power. It's cheap, reliable energy with zero emissions. What should happen there?
Well, firstly, for states like South Australia, where our manufacturing industry's been destroyed, where people in Elizabeth have got 3 generations of unemployment, they need to have cheap energy. And they're paying more than people in New York, and most of them are on the dole on Social Security. The largest employer in South Australia is the federal government. The second largest one is the state government. The third largest one is regional councils. These people have no help for themselves, yet they export the uranium to Japan and to China and to Europe, and they become a powerhouse of manufacturing, and we have to re-import the goods, but we don't have jobs for Australians. It's a disgrace, and the federal and state governments should just remove the legislation stopping people developing nuclear power stations in this country. It's as simple as that. Let the market deal with it.
I have to say to my listeners over and above Mr. Palmer, those comments make a lot of sense in the minds of many Australians. There are young people in this studio who are listening to this, nodding their heads. Your ads say, put Australia first. Does putting Australia first involve embracing your commitment to boost the weekly age pension by $150? You're saying pensioners would receive an extra $7,800 a year, giving singles $1,143 a fortnight and couples $1,871. We're told that funding of that kind, it's been modelled, would cost an extra $302 billion over 11 years. Is that affordable?
Yeah, of course it's affordable if you've got the right policies operating in your economy. Firstly, let me say that Australia spends 2/3 of what the United States spends on age pensions. We spend 2/3 of what the European Union and Japan spends on age pensions. Yet we've got our senior citizens struggling to make a living, citizens dying in Tasmania and in Canberra because they can't afford the heat in winter. They can't afford the electricity prices. They haven't got survival incomes. And, of course, the government needs to do something about it. Now, if they adopted our proposal to move the date of provisional tax from requiring companies and businesses to pay it, the taxation before they'd made the money, till after they'd made the money, they'd release $70 billion into the economy. It would turn over at least 5 times in a year. They'd have another $35 billion a year, and they'd have the $300 billion you're talking about over 10 years to pay our senior citizens. But these guys can't do it because they're mugs. They've never been in business. They've never run a tuck shop, Labor or Liberal. It doesn't matter what you like, especially Shifty Shorten. He wouldn't know what to do and run the country. We need to take control of Australia and make it better for all our citizens.
You've taken out ads with all your federal candidates, 151 seats. Who's recruited all these people?
I have. I've spent my time going around the country interviewing people and putting them together. Certainly we have a lot of willing people that want to serve the country that haven't had a lot of political experience before, but they have experience in industry. You take James McDonald, for example, standing for the Senate in Western Australia. He's raised $150 billion for Facebook and for General Motors on the international markets in London. He's someone, as an Australian, that wants to he can contribute to the development of Western Australia. He should be given the opportunity. He shouldn't have to go to countless tea parties over 20 years until he's brain dead to get into Parliament. He should be able to get into Parliament and contribute the best years of his life to the country.
You're a rugby man. A quick comment on Israel Folau.
Well, I think people need to have a religious freedom in this country, and we need to have freedom of speech. While you may not agree with people, you've got to fight to their right to defend their view. Once we start making decisions on what's right and wrong, what people can say, we'll become a very repressive society. And the battle of ideas, the best ideas will always win.
Good on you. Can I take you to preferences? You've done a preference deal with the coalition. You're unapologetic about the fact that you don't want Bill Shorten, Shifty Shorten as you call him, as Prime Minister. In 2013, when you ran in critical seats, you gave preferences in the National Party. I'll just give you some examples here and ask you to comment. In the National Party seat of Cowper, 44% of the preferences went to Labor. In Eden Monero, 46% went to Labor. In Gilmore, which is a critical seat next Saturday, 49% went to Labor. Lindsay, which the Liberals were hoped to win back, 52% went to Labor. Flinders, where Greg Hunt's got a fight on his hands, 54% went to Labor. Now, the Liberals are hoping to win Bass and Braddon in Tasmania. 52% of your preferences went to Labor in Bass, 53% in Braddon. And in your own state of Queensland, I'm just citing government-held seats here, in Bonner, 49% of the preferences went to the ALP. Bowman, 46%, Capricornia, 50%, Dawson, 46%, Dixon, 49%, Fisher, 50%, Flynn, 46%, Ford, 42%, Herbert, 43%, Hinkler, 41%, Leichhardt, 41%, Longman, 44%, and Petrie, 44%. Clive Palmer, they're big figures. Are you going to see figures like that drifting from your vote to the Labor Party on Saturday week?
I don't think so. I think they're all less than 50%, the majority that you quoted there. So the other part of the equation is that the majority went to the coalition. But we're in a different election. It's a long time. My views have matured a little bit, I think, about our country and what it stands for. I've got a little bit older. And also, we weren't facing Bill Shorten and his $1 trillion slug of taxpayers and the destruction of our very fabric of Australian life. This is at a critical time, now more than ever. We've got to rally the troops of this country, regardless of your political position, and save the country.
You talk about zonal taxation. You're saying that you would offer people, the opportunity to pay 20% less tax if they moved 200 kilometres from a state capital.
That's right. That would relieve the infrastructure problems in Sydney, solve some of the traffic problems, and create incentives to decentralise Australia. There's a lot of infrastructure in regional Australia we're not using. It only makes common sense. But people need some sort of incentive. 85% of the wealth of this country is created in the regions, yet we ignore it. Why don't we incentivise it, turbocharge it, and make the pie bigger? Let's stop arguing about what we've got and what share we get. Let's just make it better for all Australians.
Franking credits?
Well, franking credits, the Labor policy on franking credits is to put a third of our investors, elderly investors over 65, out the door on the street. You know, you've got one couple I talked to yesterday had an income of $32,000. If Shorten's proposal gets up, they'll have $19,000. How can they support themselves on less than social security benefits, yet they want to have some dignity in their old age? But bloody Paul Keating's the guy that said we'd have franking credits. He put the idea up and said senior citizens could rely on it, and then John Howard introduced it. But these people have relied on it in their life, in their retirement planning. Some of them are in their 80s. Why does Bill Shorten want to destroy these people's lives? Why is he such a bastard to these people?
Death duties?
Well, death duties at 40%. You can imagine a husband dying. Of course, the Greens are joined at the hip with the Labor Party, make no mistake about it. You can imagine a husband dying, wanting to leave his house and home to his wife, and she having to lose 40% of it because he's dead, to make her life a hell of a lot worse for her and her children. How can they survive? These Labor people are wholly negative. They've been taken over by the Greens and Dean Aftatali. They want to have the dole for life. That's what the Greens want to have. We don't want Australia to fall down that slippery slope. We've got to do something to stop it.
Good on you. Look, we've run out of time, but I think listeners would understand one thing. This bloke knows what he's talking about. Good to talk to you, Clive Palmer.
Thanks a lot, Alan. All the best.
Thank you for your time. Clive Palmer. Thank you for your time. Clive Palmer. Thank you for your time.
Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Brisbane.